This is demo O1, deploying a simple dab. So I am in the O1 deploying a simple dab folder, which is again within your main automated deployment with Databricks asset bundles folder. So make sure you click on this folder and then click on the notebook, demo deploying a simple dab. So in this demo, we will create a simple job, examine its YAML configuration, and then learn how to use the YAML configuration to run, validate, and deploy a Databricks asset bundle to our development environment. So we'll look at that databricks.yaml configuration file, we'll look at some of those key components, and then we'll use it to deploy to development. Again, if you can, just make sure you select Classic Compute at the top. You should have your lab username and over here. And then we'll run our classroom setup. Again, this just does some small setup just to standardize our environments for each lab. Again, this is only available in the Databricks Academy courses and works with this specific Vocarium lab. And while this runs, I just want to make this note out. If you have ended your lab, restarted your lab, or not run O required course setup and authentication, you do have to run this notebook to set up the authentication and set up our catalogs for this course. So make sure you do that if you have not already done that. So to start, it's easier to create a simple job using the UI, so the job UI. So if I go over here, we have the workflow UI to create our job. I find that it's easier to manually create the job first, explore the YAML configuration, and then utilize that within our Databricks asset bundle. Now, in this case, to save some time, there's been this DA job config cell, this class built for us to create a job with these two tasks. It uses the SDK behind the scenes, but let's pretend we did this manually. And we're just using this to save some time so we don't have to go through the UI to create the job. But during development, I find it's easier to create the job, look at the YAML configuration, and then use that for our dabs. So here this created the job for us, and we can see it created the job here. So now we're going to follow step 2, which is completing these steps to explore this YAML configuration for the job. So to do this, we will go to Workflows, we'll right click, and then we'll open in a new tab. So we have this job that the code or that cell created for us, Demo 1, Simple Dab UI, and then your lab username. From here, you can select your job, and then we will quickly explore this. I'm going to pause here for a second. Let me see if I can zoom in. Let me zoom in so we can see this a little bit clearer. So here we have our job. If I click on tasks, this job created 2 tasks. We're not terribly concerned with what these do. I'll quickly show you just to make you aware, but this will create a bronze table using data from a volume, and then this will create a silver table from the bronze table. Again, it's very simple code, but I'll select this, and we can see it's pulling some job parameters, doing some printing, and then it's just creating a simple table, health bronze demo 01, adding some metadata, and then reading from our volume, whatever catalog we tell it, right? So currently we're going to tell it through our job parameter to go to development. It'll go to the default schema, health volume, read in all this data, create a simple bronze table. I'll click on the silver table, and we'll take a look at this notebook. Again, it's just reading the job parameter, setting our default catalog, in this case development, and then it's just going to create a simple silver table. Again, we're not too worried about this code. Just understand it'll create 2 tables for us, a bronze and a silver, based on the parameters for the catalog that we set. If we go to the job details pane and I scroll down, again, we're pretending we did this manually, but we've set the job parameters to catalog name, pointing to our dev catalog. And then this display target parameter will simply print where this is running. And in this case, we're running this in development. That's all it does, a simple print so we can look at it later. Another thing to notice is the compute we're running on is currently serverless for both tasks. So that's our job. Again, let's pretend we manually created this and have all this information. So how do we get the YAML configuration for this job so then we can use it as a starting point for our Databricks asset bundle? What you can do is click on this little icon here, sometimes called the snowman or kebab menu. And if we select it, you can say switch to code version, YAML, and I will select this. And from the slides that you've seen earlier, this is the exact YAML configuration we will need with some slight modifications for our Databricks asset bundle. So you really don't have to memorize all of these. I like to just create the job manually, and then I copy this. So if you want, copy this now, and copy the configuration. So now we have a good starting point without having to do this manually. What I like to do is if I want to add something new, I'll go to the job, like maybe I want to add a notification. Send a notification email if this job succeeds. Go to the job UI, add it. The key value pairs and the mappings will be created here, copy it, and then you'll have them. But I'll go back to visual mode, and we're back here. So I'll go back to my notebook. And we just went through all of this, right? We went through this, we looked at the job parameters, we looked at the two tasks, both are using serverless. So we've examined our job. Again, we've pretended we created this with the UI, went and saw the YAML configuration, and then pulled that in. One thing you could do is also run this job just to make sure everything's working correctly. This has already been tested, so this does work. In step 3, we pulled the YAML configuration for the job, and we went through all of this. And your configuration will look something like this. The username will be different, but this is our YAML configuration example. So we took this and copied it. So now we want to learn how to deploy jobs using Databricks asset bundles. So as you recall, you need a databricks.yaml config file. We need resources, the resources top level mapping, the bundle top level mapping, the targets top level mapping as the baseline. Let's use our CLI and the YAML configuration we copied to, again, deploy, validate, and run our job. First, I'll run the cell, just make sure the CLI is there. Again, if this does not work, you do have to run the notebook 0, course authentication and setup. So that looks like we got the CLI working. And next, what we'll do is we need to be in the current working directory of the databricks.yaml file. So by default, wherever your notebook is, that is the current working directory here. So if I run this cell, we can see we're in workspace users, a bunch of other stuff, and then Databricks asset bundles 01 deploying a simple dab. So by default, we are here. What I'll do next is use the ls command, the bash command, to then look and just see what files are available in this location. And we can see we have a source folder, we have our databricks.yaml file starter, and then we have this notebook. So I'll run this. And just to confirm, here is our databricks.yaml file. So we can see that with our kind of command here. So now that we've confirmed that we are in the correct location to use our CLI, let's go and look at this databricks.yaml file and just quickly explore it. So we have a starter file and we're going to explore this. So I'm going to right click on it and then just open it in a new tab. And here is the databricks.yaml file, and we've added some comments here to help you out. So we have the bundle name, and this is required, so our top level mapping bundle, and we have the name demo01_bundle. Down here is where we're gonna place our resources, and we'll do that in a second. And then in our target top level mapping, we're gonna deploy to just the development target, right? Eventually we'll build this up and go to development and stage and production. But for now, let's just deploy a very simple dab. This will run in development mode. This is our default. And then this workspace is going to say, put the files and all that other stuff in this location, which is workspace users, my current username, the .bundle folder, or my bundle name, and then the target, so development in this case. So it'll just take development and place it at the end. And we'll take a look at this in a second. But here's just a very simple bundle. Now, a couple things I want to point out. The mode development defines this target as development mode, and this contains certain behaviors. The biggest one I want to point out is when we run and deploy our job using our bundle, this development mode will add a bracket dev and then your username and then another bracket before your job name. So it'll automatically enter this before your job name for you. If you want to see other behaviors of development mode, you can check out the documentation. There are a few others that you'll want to take a look at. We saw default was true, and we've discussed this before. By default, if I don't specify where I'm deploying and running or what target environment I want to go to, this will go to development by default. So typically you want to make your development environment the default. And then the workspace mapping, like we talked about, if you want to have a host in there, and let's go back real quick here. We've commented out host. I just wanted to leave this here to show you that you can modify where to go run this. In this case, we only have one workspace, so by default, it'll just use this workspace. But if you want and you had multiple workspaces, you could point development to a specific host just using this host mapping down here. So we've quickly examined that Databricks.yaml file, right? We have a general idea of how it works, but we do need a resource mapping in here to specify what to do, right? In this case, we want to deploy a job. So what we've already done is copied our job YAML configuration. Remember, what we did, in quotes, manually created the job, right? Added anything we wanted to through the GUI, and then we just went in and copied that YAML configuration file. So what I'll do now is go in and paste that copied configuration right under resources. So we have our resources top level mapping, right? We have a job, and here is my job key name. Now I want to change that, and let's see what we're supposed to change that to. And just for consistency, we're going to change that to demo 01 underscore simple underscore dab. And this will just make it easier to reference when we need to run it. This is the job name, and we'll just leave the job name as is. Again, if you want, you can change it, but this is going to be the job name. And remember, this is going to go to development. So that is development mode, which it'll append the brackets dev username in front of your job name. This job has those two tasks, create bronze table and create silver table here. And then we have our job parameters. Display target is development. Catalog name is our catalog name with the _1 _ dev. So that is our development catalog. And we'll learn how to dynamically modify this based on the target later on. But in here, you're going to want to do something. You're going to want to use a relative path for the notebook path. So what we'll do is, if we look in here, the Databricks YAML file is right here. So we need to go to source, and that's where our two notebooks live. So what I'll do is I'll modify this by removing the first part, and then adding a period for the current path, and then go to source, and then get that notebook. And I'll do the same for the second task. Now, if I go to try to run, this actually won't work yet because we need the extension of the notebook. So let me go back to just the first notebook we were working with. We need to add these extensions. Now, starting December 20th, 2024, the default extension of a notebook is actually .ipynb. So you have to make sure you know what extension your notebook is. And to do that, you can select File, go to Notebook Format, and we can actually see my notebooks here in this lab environment will be using the original either .scala, .py, .sql, or .r. In this case, both those notebooks and source are using .py. If your notebook is .ipynb, just make sure you add that correct extension. So now what I'll do is I'll go back to my Databricks.yaml file and add the extension. So we are now referencing the relative path of the notebook with the extension for both tasks. And we've just completed this step 6. So now we're looking pretty good. We modified the value here of the jobs key to just demo 01 simple dab and done relative paths to the notebooks with the extension. And again, your resources configuration should look something like this. Here's a little note, and you can check the documentation. December 20th, those new .ipynb notebook formats were the new default. So just be aware of that and make sure you know your correct notebook. So we've updated our Databricks.yaml file. We've got it all set up. So now let's validate that file. So we can do that with the Databricks CLI, the Databricks bundle validate command. This will go and validate the bundle, and it creates some kind of files in the back end there. But look at that. Our bundle has been validated. Now, you still could get a successful validate, and during deployment, maybe something could go wrong. I have seen where maybe the notebook path was off or we didn't add an extension, and this will still validate. But then when you deploy and run, it actually won't find the notebook. So this won't cover 100% of everything, but it will check most of the things you need. But this validated this Databricks.yaml file for us. So now what we can do, and actually we can see the path here, the workspace users, lab user, .bundle, the bundle name, and then the development. So again, by default, development is set. That's our only target in this example, but that's where it's putting the files. So now that we validated our Databricks.yaml file, everything seems good. Let's deploy our assets. So in this case, the job with those two notebooks from source, and let's deploy it to this workspace. Again, you could pick another workspace if you wanted to, but in this case, we only have one workspace. So Databricks bundle deploy -t is our flag for the target environment, and deploy to development, right? So deploy to the development environment. In this case, that's all we have, but it's always good to be explicit. If I remove this, should still work because development is the default. But I'll run this, and this will take about a minute to complete. But what's happening here is this is deploying to our environment, throwing the job into workflows, which we'll check out in a second. And it's going to be creating some files in this kind of path: workspace users, lab user, .bundle, and then demo01 bundle development. So we'll take a look at that in a second as well. This source linked is essentially saying it's not moving these source files to this file. If we did production, it will move all the files over here, and I'll show you that as well. But it deployed everything. So now let's view where these Databricks assets, these files were sent to, which again is just this path here. So I will go to Workspace, I'll right click and just go open a new tab. And then if I go to Workspace, Users, here's my lab user, there's .bundle, there's the bundle name we specified, the files for the development target. Eventually we'll go to stage and prod and we'll have multiple folders in here, but now we just have development. And then we have our kind of artifacts, files, and state. The source, what is it called? Source linked means it'll just link the files directly to my workspace where I was originally, so there will be no files in here. If you go to production, it'll actually copy all your files here. And if you're using the Databricks CLI from maybe locally like VS Code, it will throw the files in this location. But in this case, they're all within this workspace, so it just doesn't do it for development mode. So we saw all that. We have some notes about what I just talked about, so we'll skip all this. And now we'll complete the following steps. So what just happened, right? We have a bunch of files and you said, hey, there's nothing in there. What we've done is taken our assets, right? Source, this YAML file, and it actually created a new job for us. So let's go look at that. Again, I can go to workflows, right click and new tab, but I already have it open over here. So this is the one I created manually. If you remember, manually in quotes because we use the SDK, but here's the original one where we took this configuration to use. But if I go back to workflows, I have a second job now. So my Databricks asset bundle deployed this job for us. It hasn't run it yet, but it's deployed it. So let's select it. Let's start from the top. It's connected to Databricks asset bundles. So this job was deployed with a DAB. If I click learn more, we can see some information. Why is this task read only? It was deployed using DABs. It's locked for editing. If you need to edit this job, go to your Databricks.yaml file, edit what you need, and redeploy the bundle. So if you make a change to the bundle configuration, you do have to redeploy it. It'll get sent over here and overwrite this, and it's not recommended to disconnect from it. So we'll close this. If we go to tasks, one thing to always make sure is your tasks are referring to the notebook you expect. If I click on one of these, we can see that this looks like it's pointing to the notebook. And again, just a note that this was deployed with a bundle, so avoid editing this. If I scroll to the bottom here, we're using serverless compute. And look at this, our job parameters were set with that YAML configuration, right? Catalog name and display target. And again, here we're just using the dev catalog, but we will add more later on and dynamically change these. So the DAB deployed this job. It hasn't run it yet. So we saw that we have this prefix in front of our job, right, with the brackets. We saw the learn more and don't edit this DAB through the UI. So now what we want to do is run the job. So how do I run this job? Let's go down here and look. Databricks bundle run -t, our target flag, run in the development environment, and then we're giving it the key name of the job. And let's just go and look at that. We're giving it this name here. We're saying, go run this thing, which is just these key value pairs or these mappings. Go run this job. Let's run this cell. Again, it's going to go run it. We talked about where the job key can be found. So if you have not changed this, you'll have to use the longer job key with your username, lab user, a bunch of numbers, underscore, and a bunch of other numbers. But now it's running the job, and I can just click this. So I'll right click, open a new tab. And there it is. We went and validated, deployed, and ran a job using a Databricks asset bundle. So while it's running, I'll go back to the job and we can see it's running here. So we'll wait a second to make sure that everything ran correctly. So we'll get a note here. So we'll wait a second and then we'll go back to the job, take a look at it, make sure it ran. And let's see if, I don't think any tables should be created yet. So there's our dev catalog. There's no tables in here yet, but our job, remember, is creating 2 tables. The bronze table from this CSV file in the dev catalog, and then it'll take the bronze table and create a very simple silver table, right? Your jobs will typically be more complex than this one. Okay, during editing, we will cut out the wait time in here, but you will wait about 2 minutes. Oh, there it is, we are done. So we ran our 2 tasks. Let's refresh our catalog. Look at that. We have 2 tables from our job that we deployed with our DAB. If we go back to the job, we can see it executed successfully. And I'll just click on the first task. We can see it pulled the job parameters, told it to use the default catalog, the dynamic one we will be changing later on in another demo. And then we have our target job parameter, and all that does, the display target job parameter is within the target variable, and we're going to display that. And what this will do is just tell me I'm deploying as the development pipeline. So if I change that parameter to maybe stage or production, it'll change that here. And we're just doing this for demonstration purposes, just so we can show you. So now that is done, we went and looked at the job, everything's looking great. We'll run this cell and it's just going to go and take a look. I'm going to take a look here and show that we now have 2 tables, Health Bronze Demo 01, Health Silver Demo 01, which are just these tables that we looked at earlier. So let's make a change to our bundle configuration. We're just going to make a very simple change, right? It's not really going to do much, but we're going to go to the display target parameter where that is set in the databricks.yaml file. And we're just going to change it to say development new parameter value, right? Just to show you if you do make a change in your configuration file, you do have to redeploy the job. So I'll go back to my databricks.yaml file. All right, I already have it open, so I'll just go here. And for the parameters display target, I will create a new default value of development new parameter value. Very simple. Again, not really going to do much other than print differently in our job. So I changed that. Let me go back here. So to update the DAB, I just have to validate, and then I don't have to validate, but I'm going to validate it, and then I'm going to redeploy it. I'm not going to run it again, so we don't want to wait 2 minutes. But as you saw, I changed this databricks.yaml file. Let me go back to the job itself, and we can see that display target has not been updated. So I have to redeploy my changes. So I will run my validate and my redeployment, so Databricks bundle deploy -t development. Redeploy using that Databricks.yaml file, and it'll redeploy that job for us. So the validation was correct, and now it's just deploying it. And we'll wait a second here. All right, the deployment was complete. So now let's go back to our job. Let me just refresh this. So I'll just go out and come back in. And now look, the redeployment has updated this. So if this was more important, I could then run this update, run the job, and then this value would appear here. We're not going to do that. We're not going to wait 2 more minutes. If you would like, you can go rerun this job and you'll get a new value. You'll get an extra run over here. So we looked at the job. We looked at the new job parameters. That looked like it worked correctly. So now that we're done, this is development. So usually you want to clean up after yourself depending on how you work. So we're going to destroy our bundle. So Databricks bundle destroy. By default, remember, it's development. So by default, it'll destroy development. I 100% recommend you're always explicit here. But in this example, we only have one target environment. Development is our default. So I will just run this command and it will just delete the bundle. This -auto approve will avoid any prompts and just delete it completely. You always want to be careful deleting things. In this case, it's just a quick demo. So this will go and delete it. While it's deleting, we'll take a look at that in a second. This was an extremely simple introduction to Databricks asset bundles and how to deploy them, validate them, run them within Databricks using the Databricks CLI. Again, where you're running the CLI can differ. In our case, we're running it in a notebook since it's a little easier to have some markdown and run through all the commands and discuss it. The next question I have for you is, okay, you can develop and deploy to development, but what if I want to go and deploy to production or stage? How do I do that? How do I override values, maybe the catalog or some sort of compute value? How do I do that? And we will talk about that in the next slides and demos. But real quick, let's go look and see if our job was deleted. Oh, there it is. It's gone. If I go back, I now have the original job we created just to get that YAML configuration file. So that was the first demo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.